talking about Ghana today at the beginning in two areas: citizen participation in democracy and leadership, that is the political leadership in terms of democracy. And I would just be interested in knowing your reflections on some of these issues that are challenges really for any democracy, but for a growing, a new democracy and a growing democracy. How do you see the status of Ghana today in this regard?
Well, Ghana is being touted as one of the best fledgling democracies in Africa. We have had, since 1992, about 6 elections. We have had turnovers of political parties coming into power. And if these are anything to go by, then we would say that Ghana is a good democracy. But hey, stop there and halt and look back. What I think democracy is not the presence of a constitution, institutions of state, frequent elections, and then we say Ghana is a democracy, or any other country is a democracy. If you see the reverses in democratic dispensations in Africa, then we need to be circumspect in our trying to judge democracies in Africa. In the first place, I have always said, and I've written a lot on that democracy is nothing without good governance. And I separate the two. I do separate the two because oftentimes democracy has been equated to the presence of a constitution, the social contract, the institutions of state governance, freedoms, political freedoms, economic freedoms, etc. And when you do this, when you just measure democracy in terms of these parameters, you are wrong. Because good governance include these things that we've mentioned as democratic credentials, plus prudence in economic governance, first and foremost. If you have all these ingredients and the government is just profligate, spending on giant political projects instead of economically viable projects, there is the tendency that whilst democracy is in progress, but good governance is suffering, the gains will be derailed by the masses of the people who are unemployed, because imprudence in economic governance brings about all kinds of macroeconomic instability, higher inflation, deficit, budget deficit, foreign exchange deficit, and if you have all the balance of payment disequilibria, if you have all these things in your economy, then you are being imprudent. Number two, if the political system, in spite of the democratic credentials, right, is seriously monetized, there's no democracy then. Democracy is for sale to the highest bidder. And I tell you, in the whole of Africa, this is what is happening. That politics has been so monetized in such a way that how we elect our people is no longer the type of democratic representation that we're talking about. Right? The third thing is when the mass of the people are gullible, and therefore politics is propaganda, not politics. So that if you did a kilometer of road, you tell us that you've done 10 kilometers, and the population just parroting this thing. The government is doing well because they've done 10 kilometers, when it is pure propaganda. For me, this is not good governance. So, whilst we are praising Ghana for democratic credentials, I want any other observer to watch the following. How is politics played? How are people represented? How are the masses understanding the political process in such a way that that is the only way they want and not to derail it? If I use these parameters to measure Ghana, I tell you, I'm afraid. Because politics has been so monetized in Ghana. And any Ghanaian would tell you, except maybe members of government. When I say this, it's not because I belong to any opposition. No, I don't belong to the opposition party. I belong to my CPP. And I'm an intellectual, so I'm going to be truthful to the things that we can say about analyzing democracy. I say this also because at any point in time, there can be any innocuous trigger to derail everything. There can be an innocuous thing that will derail it because the people are fed up with something. As I said, politics is so monetized. Propaganda is too high, extremely high, and there is so much imprudence in economic governance. Imprudence in the sense that money is being wasted on unnecessary things because of the patronage system. And I say this because the two major political parties in Ghana seem to have accepted the patronage system to the extent that each one wants to maintain the status quo. And that is dangerous. It's extremely dangerous. It's like, because of the patronage system, we want to be in power by all means. Democracy is essential and good and strengthened when you consolidate it. And consolidation of democracy means that people have a belief that democracy is a process, not an event. In our current situation, we've made democracy an event where all you need is to get to to breast the tape. And so all means possible to breast the tape is done. And that is pay the money, use propaganda, do everything, and get on to it. You win power and you call the shots. I'm afraid about democracy in Ghana.
Professor Danso, you mentioned a couple of things there that are really extremely salient about the idea of democracy. First of all, you talk about the fragility of the democracy and the institutions that will support democracy. You also talk about the basis of governance, good governance, as being a necessary, if not sufficient, condition, but certainly a necessary condition for democracy. I wonder if you gave me the top 3 or 4 elements of good governance, what would they be?
There would be basic democratic tenets: a constitution, separation of powers, frequent elections, freedoms. That's number 1. Number 2, prudence in economic governance. Number 3, transparency and accountability where the people are part. These are the 3 basic things I would say form the basis of good governance.
Now, could you fall back into your role as professor and rate Ghana A to D to F on each of those?
To be honest, I would say Ghana has A in terms of the first one, democracy and the basic structures for democracy. On the second one, I would grade Ghana about F. And on the third, the same. And I'm forthright in what I'm saying because, look, on the B, prudence in economic governance, there's so much wastage. We are told that we have expended almost everything in our coffers. We are told that all the MMDAs, that's the municipal,
Mayors.
what do you call it? MDAs, that is the district assemblies and the municipal assemblies,
right,
all have overspent their budget. And the ministries have all overspent their. How did that happen if we have transparency and accountability? And nobody's talking about us. Somebody should go to prison by now if we have democracy. But that's not happening. And again, money is a profligacy is the order of the day. These are scary moments and makes our democracy fragile. The final one, and which is more scary, is the very fact that because of the patronage system, institutions of state that are good under the first rubric, that's A, the democracy, are now being belted under the hypnosis of governance. I mean, the governance system. It's like the police are working only to see what will the government say. They look at over the shoulders before they work. The military. All institutions of state are now becoming party institutions. It's scary. We've got to talk about that. We as a nation, if we want to consolidate our democracy, should be forthright and say, hey, look, this is wrong. Because when the police start working this way, when crime begin to get political colors, where are we going?
You know, I was talking to a high official in the finance ministry who expressed the same frustration that the overspending of these governmental entities, from the decentralized one all the way up to the central one. What controls can government put in place given the reality of the centrality of the presidency in democracy in Ghana?
Leadership. Nothing, no amount of legislation will put anything because people do it and the party covers them. And so what we need is a leader who says that enough is enough. Let's turn a new leaf like Zedillo did in Mexico. Can we now respect our institutions of state, institutions that are working outside party? If we did this, what will happen is that institutions of state that are built by the constitution to be to ensure accountability and transparency will then work without recourse to the party. That's the only one-stop shop that leadership changes course finished. But people talk about legislation. People talk. If you legislate and the institution is under the government, I mean, come on. So I want to see a leader who says enough is enough. No more overspending. No more profligacy. I mean, the institutions of state, Yoko, BNI, police, please work without me. You know, when you hear of some kind of anything that is negative, anything that is criminal, please go ahead. Even if it is a government official, if a leader does this once, we had a situation during Rawlings' time when there was no democracy and when people feared to do anything wrong. But when his own people started doing wrongs and they were not attacked, that's how everything started deteriorating. And so we need a leader, not necessarily a despot. No, a leader using democratic tendencies to be able to curb where we're going, because we are close to the tipping point.
A couple of days ago, there was a series of 2 articles on reform, constitutional reform, the sharing of power that's concentrated in the hands of the president now more broadly across the government. First of all, do you subscribe to that point as an approach, although you argue that you really just need good execution of what you've got now? Exactly. Do you subscribe to that point as a necessary constitutional reform of a growing democracy that Ghana is?
A growing democracy in a place where people are just too gullible, where the system is patronized, or a patronized system, where the system is monetized, will not subscribe to what you are describing. We want, what we have is enough to really bring democracy. No 2 ways about that. But it's like whoever is in governance is interpreting the democratic tenets or using the democratic things that we have in Ghana to his advantage. That's all. But if we got a leader who allows state institutions to work independently, who would himself subject himself to the scrutiny of the people, because there is political participation in Ghana, but skewed. When they say participation, people vote for their own people and that kind of thing. But the people have to pay. It's bribery. Our MPs are people who have spent huge sums of money to get where they are. So when they go there, all they have to do is to recoup the money. Clearly. So I wouldn't subscribe to anything say that whittle away the powers of the president. No, the president must use his powers more productively to see change and not to think about the next election and therefore let things loose. And therefore his people become, how do I call them? I mean, hounds who hunt down any other person who is in opposition. I mean, that's wrong. If this president or any other president sits back, if it is the police, allow them their parameter. If it is the Yoko, that is our FBI, let them work. Let them work outside. If it's a government official who is doing something, they know. And I doubt if our BNI doesn't know what is happening in the cupboards of any other person in Ghana. So the strength of the president as per our constitution is positive. But if it is being misused, misapplied, if that strength is in a leader who wants to consolidate democracy in Ghana, I tell you, we'll go places.
Yeah. So you don't think that the weakening of the presidency, a strong presidency, is the way to continue to pursue democracy?
Absolutely not.
You probably follow, since you follow world affairs as much as you follow things going on here in Ghana, President Obama had a very bad week a couple of weeks ago in the United States. Right. Could the president of Ghana ever have a bad week like that, where the IRS problems are going, the internal revenue problems and the other issues that he was faced with, all of them seem to come in? Can a president here in Ghana have that kind of scrutiny and have to be accountable, come before the camera and said, I'm going to get into this, I'm going to look into this, I'm going to get to the bottom of this, and those responsible will be fired?
Our presidents do get into more trouble than the Obamas. You have a situation where a lot of things come, a cluster of problems. For example, there is something like Danso, that is electricity, which is not stable, water, not there, some scandals, fires, gutting, places left and right, all at once. And the president finds himself in a tight corner, unable to explain.
So he's held accountable. They do hold the president accountable.
I'm coming up to that. Yeah. What happens is that when many people, and then you have this talk shows and everybody insulting, and in Ghana, you see, we have gotten to a point where there is so much indiscipline. So people could insult the president right in the face. And therefore, the president becomes a little uncomfortable. And he comes up from time to time. There was a time he himself told us that we have overspent our budget. It shows the corner in which he was then. And often he has come again to talk about this electricity failures and whatnot. He's come out to talk about a whole lot of things that are not going on right. Roads that have been left unkept and that kind of thing. So they come into that. But unlike the Obamas, who are scrutinized fully and at times they have their back to the wall, our presidents over here, what? They come out, say something, and the party machinery is put into place for propaganda. And at times blame is put on the opposition to kill the case. So unlike the Obamas, our presidents over here have a leeway of going about it and in a nonchalant way. All right? Okay, we say we'll fix it. So shut up. Kind of.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the role of Parliament. There must be committees dedicated to certain oversight. There must be, the president must go to certain parliamentary committees for consent and then to the full parliament. How do you grade Parliament?
Our Parliament has been a little disappointing from both sides, as I initially said, because of the patronage system. Everybody is trying to defend his turf. Parliament has committees, oversight committees, but they are so polarized again. In terms of accountability, for example, the Oversight Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, for example, I mean, come on, why are they there? How did it happen that we overspend our budget? And they keep quiet. I can't believe it. They have more powers than the president. If anything hadn't come before the Parliament, it cannot be expended. I mean, you can't spend money which Parliament has not given you. I mean, contracts are awarded to foreigners when it should have come to Parliament. It doesn't come. Look, Parliament, when you attack them, they begin to take a defensive posture. They are only united when it comes to their own remunerations and things like that, their own, perks left and right. But when it gets to the business, they are so partisan. And they are, instead of looking at Ghana, and I've always attacked them too, and I've said that, look, governance is different from politics. People must understand this. Governance is completely different from politics. Do all your politics. When you win power, you are now to govern, and you are governing a country. The metrics for governance is completely different from politicking. So as soon as you get to governance, there are the problems of development, there are the problems of freedom, there are the problems, and that has no political colors. Unfortunately, when we reach Parliament, we have forgotten that we are talking about governance, no more politics. Until Africa begins to divorce politics from governance, not necessarily because they are intertwined one way. Politics gets you into governance. But once you reach governance, the governance stage is one which has no political colors. It's serious business. In Africa, we don't have it that way. Politics is still mixed with governance. Let me give you one particular example where I'm very much annoyed. The chairman of a winning political party or a ruling political party or the secretary general of that party sits in cabinet. It's outrageous. For me as a political economist, to me it's outrageous. Outrageous. But that's what happens. In cabinet, we haven't voted for this person. He has no locus standi where the democratic dispensation or law is concerned. But cabinet meetings, he is present. It is no longer a party thing. It's a Ghanaian thing. It is a national thing. What the hell is he doing in parliament, in a cabinet meeting? What is his status? As a cabinet member? As an observer? Come on, give me a break. We're now talking, that's why I'm saying governance is totally different from politics. You do your politicking, whatever means, fair or foul, you get to governance, you are now governing the country. Where we need roads, highways, schools, hospitals, where we need employment, that has nothing to do with party politics. Your manifesto is there, fine. You implement it through the governance system. You don't implement your manifesto through the party system.
Do you think that this is analogous to what is going on in India today with President Singh, Prime Minister Singh, and Sonia Gandhi?
I wouldn't say they are parallel, or they're similar somehow. And I strongly suspect that we even talk about India as one of the best democracies and that kind of thing. Fine. But anything that would derail democracy must be taken out. It's like a virus in a computer. You got to clean it up. When you clean, the computer works better. And I've always said that 1 million times in this country. Now look, once you mix politics with governance, you miss the point. You're always guided by parochial political interest rather than national interest. And I think our constitution is so good in such a way that if a government should come to power and use the constitution perfectly, you don't have to fear one-term presidency. But all people fear is one-term presidency, so they allow propaganda to override governance, and the gullible Ghanaian. Look, I haven't done the research, but I think more than 31% of the youth are unemployed, seriously unemployed, I believe. And such a thing is very serious if you can talk about the Arab Spring. Maybe we should go there. Because Gaddafi had given them everything they wanted. I mean, if you finish school, you can do whatever you want. Why was it Tunisia? Why was that innocuous situation, the emulation of one person, create such fire? And that's what I'm warning my people. That any innocuous situation can bring about a certain fire we cannot dodge.
Well, Professor Danso, let's move on then. We'll come back, as I said, to Ghana at the end here. But let's talk more about the region now and West Africa, and how do you see democracy going there? I'm assuming that you are of the opinion that in spite of all of your observations, maybe I should ask you the question, in your region, what is the best working democracy?
Well, you would say Ghana, but we need to be watching Sierra Leone coming up. We need to be watching Sierra Leone. The post-war situation is such that now they have realized that, look, governance must be governance. Politicking, and I like the president. People are asking him, "Oh, stay on, you've done so well." The usual thing in Africa. He said no, and he's putting the real pillars of democracy there in Sierra Leone. And I believe Sierra Leone is a country to watch in the future if we don't get other persons who would come the way Ghana is going and that kind of, because we started also very well, but on and on, we were slipping back into days of non-democracy or non-good governance and that kind of thing. So I would say Sierra Leone is doing well. Liberia is still hiccuping a lot because of the situation that brought Sirleaf Johnson in, and the clouds surrounding her, and the bitterness of the followers of the footballer. We need to be very careful about Liberia. I don't think Liberia is doing better than Sierra Leone, even though Sierra Leone was worse than the Liberian situation. I don't know, but I think Ivory Coast needs to hurdle the scars quickly. Unfortunately, Ivory Coast has a similar problem like Ghana. Politicization of the governance system, tribalization of the governance system, and therefore, in totality, I would say that democracy is hiccuping very badly in West Africa. Hiccuping very badly because of the patronage system, because of the use of the tribal card. It's extremely dangerous. There was a time I gave a paper in Ghana and I told them that I do not care who rules, I care how you rule. And so we had a presidential candidate who came on air to insult me about all those things, and I gave it back to him. And I told him, I'm not going to vote for him. That doesn't mean I'm leaving the party. Because when I look at the presidential candidates, there are better ones whom I think would rule better. So I wouldn't care who as such, but I see who can really do the job. And if he's not doing the job, I will withdraw my support. And I think in West Africa, we haven't gotten to that. Look at Britain, the near kind of hung kind of parliament and whatever it is, the crisis. But it's like the British people just really saw that, okay, there is a mechanism for putting a prime minister there. If we have such a situation, they put Cameron there, and who cares whether it is Cameron or somebody else. What Cameron is coming to do is what worries the British people. And they demand X, Y. Now, what is on the table is Europe. Where do we belong in Europe? And everybody is debating it. So the point I'm trying to say is this, that in West Africa, we need a new crop of leadership, which would use the tribal system that we have positively to unite us, not to divide us. because the many hotspots that we have in West Africa or generally in Africa is because one tribe is used against the other where politics is concerned. Let me shift on to Kenya, for example. The Kenyan example is clear. The Kikuyus are about 33% of the population. The Meru and Embu is about 3-4%. But the Kalinjis are 12%, Arab Moist tribe. So the Kikuyus have been able to marry these tribes to themselves, not actual marriage. Like, oh, don't you see we are friends politically? And using the tenets of democracy, that's why I say democracy is different from good governance. The Kikuyus have always tried to get the 50+1 that we are looking for in a democracy.
By any means?
By any means. So you use the tribes, and so the Luos, who are about 30%, a large tribe, will never come to power by using this same democratic tenets. Oh, the British are clapping for it because we won 50% plus 1%. And that was what was going on. You know, and in Ghana it's the same thing. We have a tribe, less populous, and they vote en masse. Because once upon a time, a leader of Ghana who ruled for so long a time, 19 years, came from that tribe. And that is the base of one party. Now they tried to move throughout the country where our first president did so well in unionizing us through the tribe. So there are several of such minor tribes all over the country. And wherever they are, they will vote for that party.
But didn't Nkrumah try very hard to bring Ghana along and rise above tribalism?
Thank you. That's exactly what I've referred to. That Nkrumah did so well to detribalize Ghana. So many tribes moved into several areas. And as I'm saying, the Ebe tribe, for example, which votes for one party no matter what, most of them, they are all over the country. And so you might see that, votes are coming from this part of the... And that is to the plastic ingenuity of Nkrumah. The tribe was not known to the extent that people who came from another tribe represented another tribe in parliament. And there are several of them. J. Mensa, for example, he didn't come from where he was. He stood as a parliamentary candidate. Nkrumah himself, Accra. And that was the beauty of democracy. We reached a point in this country where a certain tribe said that if you didn't come from this part of our land, we won't allow you to vote. And then people were maimed and that kind of thing. So the parties themselves, when they are canvassing for votes, use the tribe instead of...
Well, I want to go back to something you said. You said you can look at tribalism as a positive force in a society.
Yes.
I suspect that that's what we would call or use under the rubric of diversity.
That's right.
How do you make that transition? Nkrumah obviously tried. Mozambique, they tried in their constitution when Frelimo came to power. They tried to move tribe. How do you make the transition? There was a conference in 2012 in Botswana on democracy and diversity. It was held there. I don't know if you were in attendance on that, but you probably followed it.
That's right.
But I didn't see much on the diversity thing.
That's right.
How does Africa bring tribalism to a positive force called diversity?
Very easy. Nkrumah did it. First and foremost, when the British were colonizing us, on every form you filled for any employment or for school and that kind of thing, there was the tribe there. Hometown, tribe, that kind of thing. Nkrumah removed it. Our tribe is gone. So there's no form you filled in the past where your tribe. And at times on the colonial form they have native of. So we are natives of Ghana. Finished. Nkrumah did that, the first thing. The second thing he did was the boardinization of schools. Boardinization. That schools were proper schools, housed the pupils or the students, and they interacted more. Even today in our country, those remnants are there. People quarrel on the basis of schools, not on the basis of tribes. Which school did you attend? I attended Infantipim. Then Adisade will tell you, but Infantipim is a school, mine is a college. And they meet often, to see Infantipim. And in Infantipim or Adisade or Accra Training College, you will meet all the tribes. And they love each other and they competed among themselves. Schools competition were very high. Whether it's singing, choir system, or football, or sports, or any other kind of thing. And we felt ourselves as Ghanaians. The third thing he did was civil service. You never stayed at a place for more than 4 years. 3 years is enough, you are transferred to a place. So there was high intermarriage. Young man of about 24, 25, you transfer him to a place. Another 3 years is going to a place. Teachers were not, where you came from, you don't teach there. And gradually Ghana became Ghana. And we loved each other, not where you came from, but maybe the club where you are. I mean, you are teaching in a certain town and the townsfolk.
And you see a reversal of that?
Come again?
Do you see a reversal of that? A deterioration
Great.
of that? Yes?
Great reversal.
Really?
Great reversal. We started a process called debodinization. Because the World Bank told us that it is called, yes. We even the universities, we are now bringing it back. In the 80s, we had many more students and only a third of them were on campus. Now we have come back to a situation where we want to house almost all, we have 34,000 students now, and we house about 28,000 of them. Yes. But in the past, only about 10,000 of them were housed and the rest came from home. And they were had to hire places left and right. It's difficult. But there was a big reversal, and there's no way we can go back to Nkrumah's days. Because
so they're losing connection then? But
they're losing connection.
This is a sort of an isolated community.
Exactly. And then schools, because of the debodinization, you have them in enclaves. If it is Ewe land, only Ewes are there. And what happens most is that even in some basic schools, we are being told they must learn the local language. And what happens is that, yes. There is where there are borderlines, for example, my father's hometown, Enum borders the Ewe land. So what happens is that there are some schools in the border areas, most of the teachers are Ewes, and they want to teach Ewe, and my people don't want it. So there are skirmishes of bad blood between the two tribes and that kind of thing. So we're going back.
Interesting. Yes. President Danso, I do want to go back to West Africa again,
Yes.
and your comments on Sierra Leone and Liberia. The war in Sierra Leone was obviously advanced significantly and in horrific ways by Charles Taylor.
Right.
The war in Liberia also had the same. Yes, was Charles Taylor also. Yet Charles Taylor is in jail in The Hague for crimes in Sierra Leone, and no one has been punished for crimes in Liberia. Could you reflect on that a bit, sir?
I strongly suspect that that was very wrong. And Charles Taylor's incarceration is good, no two ways about it. But all those involved, and that is when we say the victor's justice, it may live to bounce back. Conflict is such that it doesn't die if you don't kill it. And so a generation 2, 3, 4 to come, somebody will rake this up. It happened in Kosovo. The Kosovo problem started in 1389. Who is alive? But because it wasn't killed, it came back in the First World War, it came back in the Second World War, then it came back after the post-Cold War situation. So that the Liberian situation has not been really tackled. And I believe the way they have handled Salif Johnson's case is not correct. I mean, there is evidence to the fact that she patronized Charles Taylor. And if that is so, she must also have been indicted. Or if she has apologized, actually.
It's a 1,300-page
Exactly.
peace and,
Yes.
and reconciliation.
And I know about that. And several other persons who took part in this kind of carnage, we are working about.
Prince Johnson.
Johnson. He turned himself into...
He's in the Senate.
He's a senator and a pastor. Mm-hmm. He doesn't care what he did. And I believe if all these people were indicted, it would have brought some kind of soul-searching kind of thing in Liberia. But unfortunately, at times, the way we go about bringing about so-called peace is not the absence of war, actually. It's a little debilitating. Syria, whatever it is, we want to see some group really incarcerated, and we think that is the end of everything. But that's wrong. I think there are many people in Sierra Leone and Liberia who also need some kind of indictment. But I think the international community thought Charles Taylor was the main. The others could be dealt with internally. But that's not working. It cannot. Because if we started anything right now in Sierra Leone or Liberia, you're going to reignite the whole process.
And that's precisely my point, Professor Danso, and that is how tenuous is democracy in, particularly in Liberia. I'm interested in your point on Sierra Leone, that it's probably got a stronger foundation.
Right.
But if the blue hats of the United Nations were to leave Liberia tomorrow, what do you think would happen?
I strongly suspect that a lot of problems would come up there. The cementing of democracy in Liberia is not going the way. In fact, we were more interested in the security sector reforms, but not any pacifist kind of way of trying to bring the Liberians together. The counties are still looking at each other with animosity. It's clear. Yes. And if the blue helmets leave without having cemented the principles of democracy and good governance, I don't think we're going to see Liberia heading forward. And again, I think it's a pointer to the fact that it's not good. I've written a few articles about that. As I said, democracy is a process, not an event. And therefore, when the West, especially, there is a problem in any area in Africa or the world, what they want to see is a rush to the ballot box, and we say democracy. It's wrong. Liberia needs a few decades of tutelage. And I wouldn't mind if we reinvented the trusteeship council. Seriously. So that people, we are now in a global village. So if there are good technocrats which can be taken to that country which is in turmoil to help build the country, it's just like peacekeeping. You bring in these soldiers to come and keep the peace. Why can't we bring technocrats to come and help build the place for a decade, two, whatever it is? Cement the principles of democracy, put the people together by some programs before we let them go for their own elections and things like that. We rush Liberia again into democracy. We rush Sierra Leone, but the Sierra Leone one, let me be honest, the 10,000 British troops did a lot, and they stayed longer than
the UN held it. Well, let me allow you to dispense with one of your other small neighbors before we move to the really big one.
Right.
Cote d'Ivoire.
Cote d'Ivoire has a tribal problem. So Cote d'Ivoire has a similar problem that we have, but as we said, Nkrumah did much more to help unite Ghana. Cote d'Ivoire has a northern population which really doesn't know where they belong. And the French colonial system made it possible for anybody within the French colonial area to belong to the French colonial area. So when the boundaries were carved, finally, by 1939, this will be Ivory Coast, this will be this, there was that flux. And so Ouattara himself, for example, born in Burkina Faso, his parents found themselves in La Côte d'Ivoire, a whole lot of things, you know. So the North-South divide needs a kind of accommodation, and it needs a leader who is ready to bring about that. The next contention is the problem of France, who always want to choose a leader for the French-speaking countries. That's also something which is negative. Then the tribes themselves. It's like historically, some tribes do not see eye to eye with each other. And again, it depends on the leadership to be able to iron this out. Worse is what happened in the from 2010 to 2011. And I do not think Ouattara is doing well to clear the mess.
But were you encouraged by the election result, although not by the incumbent not leaving, but were you encouraged by the conduct of that election in Cote d'Ivoire?
It was wrong to have gone to that election. It was wrong for Gbagbo to have taken part in that election. It was, from 2006, it was clear. The signs were on the wall. I mean, expert opinion showed that, look, the bitterness among the people, the way things have gone from 1993, when Houphouët-Boigny, was about dying, and Ouattara came in, the constitutional problems, the constitution made it clear. If the head of state was not there, it was the Speaker of Parliament, who should take over. Ouattara came in as prime minister, which was not in the constitution. So things were going bad. The international community sat back. And I have always indicted the international community. What is going on in Ghana? You guys are praising us. But what is going on wrong? Why don't you talk about it? In order to shape us. You know, so in Cote d'Ivoire, the whole thing was from 93, and from 2006, 2003, there were some skirmishes. And we said we were going to elections in 2005. It was postponed to 2006. That is when the UN should have known that, hey, look, there's trouble. On and on, we kept postponing until 2010. What Gbagbo had then been on for about close to 10 years. So it should have been encouraged we should have had a program to exit Gbagbo and make sure that there is something new.
Well, his wife had a project of keeping him in the power.
Well, there is a price for everybody.
Yes, yes.
There is a way of exiting. Assad, for example, I'm saying, hey, look, the way we're threatening him when we get you ICC and whatnot, whereas the rebels, we are saying we are giving them arms, it's wrong. He has a right to defend his own state and himself. So the way we're going about Assad, for example, is not the best for the Syrian people. Who cares about Assad? Let's care about the Syrian people. It's the same thing in Africa. When we don't want a Mugabe, we threaten, we want to do something, and the guy also turns his anger onto his own people.
Let's talk about your big neighbor and really the big elephant on the block, Nigeria.
Nigeria.
Could you spend some time? I don't even want to pose a specific question. I just
Right.
in your reflections on what is there now.
Well, I would just
In terms
describe
of democracy, obviously.
right. I would just describe Nigeria the way Wole Soyinka described it. He says, and I quote him, "It is an open sore of the continent." It's an open sore of the continent. Nigeria has everything to be a giant in Africa. Nigeria has gotten the wealth that few African countries have. Nigeria has gotten the population, and then what we can do is that to use this as a demographic dividend. Nigeria has gotten the land mass. So what is wrong? Governance.
And the population mass.
And the population.
Governance.
Nigeria has gotten all the ingredients of democracy, as I said, but governance is weird. I think it is the center of corruption in Africa. I think there's no other country that is more corrupt than Nigeria. And they themselves accept it. They know it. What to do about it is the problem. And Nigeria is always calling for, or the Nigerians, my friends, are always calling for high-handedness. They need a leader, so they believe in dictatorship. They believe, you meet any Nigerian and say, we want Jerry Rawlings. We want Jerry Rawlings. To wait, it means they think only high-handedness can keep Nigerians under some kind
But they've had military rule.
They've had military rule, but military rule is military rule has always exacerbated the problems of Nigeria. It's under military rule that more corruption is unearthed. It's under military rule that there's no governance, call it if you want it. But the wealth of Nigeria, if it is properly channeled, I tell you, several Nigerians have their own private jets. Several Nigerians have airlines. Several Nigerians have businesses outside Nigeria. No, come on. If you got leadership and good governance, that will channel all these things into positive apertures. I tell you, Nigeria is a giant. I wouldn't say Nigeria is a democracy. Anything can happen in Nigeria anytime. And again, if you want to talk about indiscipline, my country is indisciplined, but Nigeria is higher.
Anything could happen in Nigeria?
Yes.
Another Biafra?
Not necessarily another Biafra. What I'm trying to see is that we are going to have a situation where Nigeria is difficult to govern. Because of the indiscipline and the corruption, you would have pockets of instability throughout. And that makes governance difficult, like Boko Haram, like the MEMS, and if you have pockets of them like that.
How do you rationalize North-South divide?
Exactly. Their politics is always horizontal, not vertical. Horizontal in such a way that we get from east to west, or enclaves where political parties are strong, not where you have from Sokoto to say Lagos, the party runs through. And so this north-south divide, if parties even come together, the north would want to dictate who comes next, or the south say we don't agree. And the other little political parties feel hemmed in. And that's not good. And it is the basic reason why some of them would even support and sponsor terrorism, like the Boko Haram. If Goodluck Jonathan, could come out to say that he suspects that members of his own ruling circles do support Boko Haram, then you can imagine to what extent corruption and that kind of non-adherence to democracy has come into Nigeria. The North-South divide is also glaring in the sense of development. Nigerian development is costlier than any other country on the continent. It's like because of the corruption. And therefore, the North has been neglected seriously. Boko Haram is saying Western education is haram or it's bad. But it is the same education that, in fact, their leader had a master's degree. You know, so if we had used the same Western education to educate the North properly, they will still have their religion, but they will see modernity as a sense of belongingness. Unfortunately, the North have been left unattended to. Much more monies that had to go to the North are squandered by senators and by governors and that kind of thing. So once you leave the North that way, they have no choice but to be used by Al-Qaeda and other people like that.
To finish up with West Africa before we move on to East Africa, I wondered if you could, did you find the developments in recent elections in, well, let me ask you about the Gambia first before I move to the. Are you discouraged about the presence of the Gambia and its leadership on the continent of Africa still?
Very much so. Very much. It's a disturbing situation, and I have always said that in Africa, one of the basic problems we're having is the question of transitions. If you don't build a system which transits its own leadership, and we believe it is leaders who have to dictate and draw the contours for change, then we are in trouble. And that's what we are seeing in the Gambia. That's what we are seeing in Zimbabwe. That's what we are seeing in several other African countries. All right? The main point is this, that if you don't build a system outside yourself, then you see yourself as part of the system, like Yahya Jammeh is doing.
Jammeh, yeah.
He doesn't see anybody qualified enough.
So is Jammeh the last president for life? So self-designated in West Africa? In West Africa?
I wouldn't know, as I'm saying, because when you have these little despots, when they come, they begin to change the constitutions, or they begin to tamper with the constitution in such a way that they have a gullible kind of followership. And when you have that, it's a big problem. In Gambia, this man has turned himself not only into a despot, but he's turned himself into a demigod.
Okay.
You know, the man says, I have medicines for AIDS, I have medicine for this, and people worship him.
Gave himself a PhD.
Exactly.
Made himself a brigadier general.
That is the thing.
I think he was a lieutenant. I think he was a private when he took the coup.
Exactly.
Last one as we finish up with Senegal.
Senegal was doing extremely very well. I go to Senegal every year. I have an obligation to teach at the UN Institute for Economic Development and Planning, UNIDEP. I teach there. I teach integration, and it's a UN program. Anytime I go there, I see they have problems. But I thought I loved Abdoulaye Wade until he began tampering with the constitution. You could see that he put the pillars of democracy down in Senegal and was one of the leaders we were looking up to in African integration. One of the leaders who was forthright about the need for African integration and things like that. But then all of a sudden, like any other African head of state, when they are leaving, they don't know why they should leave. They don't know where they're going. They don't build a system that caters for them and the nation. So they believe they are the ones to continue supervising the system until they die. So unfortunately, he created some bitter process in Senegal. Until then, he was very much loved. Then all of a sudden, rumors that he was preparing his son to take over from him. And then I was there in 2007, I've forgotten the year, when lots of money came into Senegal because they were going to have the Organization of Islamic States conference. And so Gaddafi and others, everybody just pumped money. And his son was the how do I call it? Exactly, the organizing. And everything showed that this man was preparing a kind of close associates and a clientele. And that didn't go down well. So the new president, sir, is doing well, except that now there has been that problem. The Casamance problem had not been solved, SARS problem with the tribes following Diouf line and that kind of thing is a problem. But I think with democracy coming up, if things go very well, I think Senegal is a quieter place, a calm place. Unemployment is very high.
So the francophone Anglophone divide in West Africa does it still exist as a?
It does. It does exist. It does. We're trying to build ECOWAS, and one of the biggest babes in the spokes of ECOWAS integration is this UEMOA-ECOWAS dichotomy, where the French still keep supporting UEMOA seriously. So anything you do it double. We're trying to sign the EPAs with Europe, and we don't know whom to sign with, whether UEMOA should sign or ECOWAS should sign, and that is a problem. Again, the strides towards ECOWAS serious integration is being hampered because they claim they have a union already. And what France is trying to do is rather to woo some of the Anglophone countries to join the CFA zone. I don't think it will work. Nigeria doesn't want it, Ghana doesn't want it. I don't think it will work. The dichotomy is bad.
Just to be mindful of your time, Professor Danso, we have about 20 minutes left and give you time to get to your 10 o'clock
Let's
meeting.
go ahead.
I vowed I'm going to get you there. But look, if we could turn to East Africa now and talk a little bit about what is going on there. And they don't have a Anglophone, Francophone divide.
That's true.
That you have here. But I'm sure they have other things. I wonder if you could talk about it, everyone from Uganda to,
Right.
I'm doing Mozambique, obviously, but
Right.
I wonder if you could reflect.
Frankly speaking, the reinvigoration of the EAC, that's the East African Community, Tanzania, Uganda, Kenya, and now Burundi and Rwanda joining, is very positive. It's a compact area, and they're thinking about getting a common currency very soon.
Mm-hmm.
They're thinking about putting the economies together as a union, and I'm in full support of that. The only problem is the question of instability in some parts, specifically Uganda. Even though it's coming down a little, the system of governance in Uganda leaves much to be desired. It looks as though the West supported Yoweri Museveni for a long time. In fact, lots of monies were pumped. In 1997, I remember in 2007, Americans were still giving plenty of money, as if, or in the words of Clinton, he is the only one who could stabilize the Great Lakes region. We need to study the Great Lakes region, the matrix of tribal interconnectivity. The Rwandese are the largest tribe within that area, the Bakongo area, all the way to Kenya and that sort of thing. And it's unfortunate that they were boxed into that small area. And so this kind of linkage and the type of colonialism that went on over there underscores or explains the kind of politics that go on over there. And it looks as though we don't understand this. And so idiots like Jonas Savimbi and others get up, Holding Roberto and others get up, Kone and others get up, and they get supported from outside. And so right now, the place is not that very safe, except for the countries that I've mentioned. Tanzania, Rwanda, Burundi, they are settling. And if they settle for integration very well, that is very good. But Uganda is problematic.
Is he trying to prepare his son to succeed?
It's rumored. In fact, there was a delegation from Uganda quite recently here in our country, and I had a chance to talk to them. I had a chance to give them a lecture, and you could see they are seemingly having the same problem that we have, one way or the other, with some differences. In Uganda, the country is so polarized along tribal lines, along party lines. The political party representatives who came here didn't want to even shake hands with each other or talk to each other. Yeah. The government party representatives and the opposition party representatives, and when we asked them to mix up and start talking, because here we have our problems, but we joke in parliament, they said no way. So in Uganda, I can still see long period of turmoil. Even if Museveni loses power, there's going to be a long period of instability because he has ruled the longest. He's created a clientele and followership. He's brought about the patronage system, and it's going to be very difficult. So we need to watch the future of Uganda. But if integration is going to be smarter and faster, there's nothing that's going to happen.
Did you think that after Idi Amin that the problems of the east of Uganda were gone forever?
Absolutely not.
And apparently
But
not.
Idi Amin is in the dustbin now. Nobody remembers him. And the problems of Uganda are not going to emanate from his angle that, oh, these are the followers of Idi Amin and therefore we... No. The problem now is Museveni. The problem now is the system of governance, the patronage system, profligacy, and the lies, you know. But if you move a little further to IGAD, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, that is made up of Sudan, you know, the problem of Sudan,
Right.
you know, Eritrea, Ethiopia. These are countries that don't see eye to eye with each other in any way. And putting them together in the form of a union called IGAD, for me, is a mistake. And all they can do is to maybe some of them joining the East African community, that is specifically Ethiopia can join easily and it will be easier. Ethiopia and Eritrea don't talk to each other. They have gotten thousands and thousands of military men along their 3,000-kilometer border. It doesn't make sense. And that is the problem in that area too. Somalia, we all know the problem already. It's not going to die now. And we need, as I said, if I were the United Nations, and I have my own indictment of the United Nations, this is the time to be more active. This is the time the United Nations should reinvigorate the trusteeship council. Somalia needs the help of the UN to be governed by technocrats from all over the world for decades to change the place. But to leave Somalia to the ballot box again,
not going to work. It's not enough. Let's talk a little bit about Mozambique. When I was there in 2009, I interviewed Afonso de Cloma.
yeah.
I also interviewed Joaquim Chazano. As a matter of fact, I had him as a guest speaker at my university. At that time, de Cloma told me that he's back from the bush, they were going to bring democracy. Now he's announced he's back in the bush on the other side of Gonzo. What's going on?
That is the thing. If I'm not in, nobody should be in, kind of situation. But unfortunately, governance in Africa, that is the thing. I have always said that where we have had troubles like Mozambique and other places, when a leader sets in, all you need to do, there's no way, you have no choice but to bring about some kind of social cohesion at whatever cost. You know, I mean, yield into the opposition one way or the other. Let them understand that it's our nation we are building. But when we want the spoils of politicking, party have won, and I'm calling the shot, and we try to suppress opposition, or we try to make opposition irrelevant, you know, beyond the war, I think the best thing is a kind of nation building in which everybody is a player. Unfortunately, in Africa, it doesn't happen that way. That's what's happening in Mozambique. You know, no one promised, but he didn't do it. Yeah. He himself didn't do it. He didn't do what I'm talking about. You know, so he wants to go back to the bush. It doesn't make sense. Unfortunately, there is that side of the international community that will support him because of something that they want in the soil. I believe, I don't know, but I'm speculating that the Chinese want to help him.
Yeah. If we look now to the other side, southern Africa, we can spend some time talking about South Africa, Botswana, Namibia, but South Africa. What do you see as the future for South Africa as a beacon on the southern side, as Nigeria probably should be given its size on the west side?
South Africa has all it takes to be a beacon not only of the southeast part of Africa, but the whole of the continent. They've got the businessmen, they've got the business acumen, the entrepreneurial skills are there, the capacity is great, but again, the governance system. When I read that the crime rate in South Africa is higher than the United States, I was shocked. When I read that road carnage is higher than anywhere in the world, so what's happening? And fraud. I was almost nearly defrauded by a certain reputable housing, whatever it is. So, in South Africa.
This is what the image we have of Nigeria is.
Yes. So I'm saying, do we need that? I loved Mandela for one thing. He saw where they were coming from, where they were, and said, where do we go from here? And build a system which nobody should be able to change, in the sense that everybody thought there was going to be black on white kind of reverse kind of racism. Fortunately for us, Mandela's, come on, we're building the state. Beyond him, yes, Mbeki did very well. But Zuma, I have my doubts. I've got to be plain about it. Either he's not very well educated and therefore does not understand the realities and the imperatives of nation building, and believes in the old. Like I always see Zuma as somebody who may become a Mugabe. Not necessarily not wanting to go, but will spoil the system. Because I don't think he has what it takes to rule a big country like South Africa. I don't think he has what it takes to understand the international system. I do not think he has what it takes to understand the South African problematic. And he's still on that, how do I call it, sentimentalist approach to governance. It doesn't work. So if South Africa is to go anywhere beyond Zuma, they must look for a level-headed person, well-educated, who understands the problematic of South Africa in relation to the African problematic, and know how to build South Africa to build Africa.
Do you think that apartheid has been replaced with the have and the have-not divide in South Africa?
That is the case. Apartheid is gone, but what makes society click in terms of having the basic necessities of life has not arrived in South Africa yet.
And the ANC?
The ANC is, I've had a chance to talk to some very important persons in the ANC on my sojourn around Africa. Anytime we met, be it, I work for some labor organizations,
yes.
And if we have meetings in Cairo, I met some of them. In Algiers, I met some of them. In Namibia, in Windhoek, I met a lot of them. We talk about South Africa. And they are all of one accord that ANC has a big problem. It's too large, it has many tendencies, and each tendency is trying to, so some of them are even predicting an implosion, especially under Zuma. Others think, no, they will bounce back. Yes, the ANC as a force needs some kind of spiral kind of growth. If that doesn't come and they are static, because in dialectics there is nothing like statism. If you introduce statism into any form of matter,
yes,
it goes, it smells sour. So I can foresee a situation where the ANC may break up if Zuma continues to do what he's doing. And the breakup of the ANC, on the other hand, people I think Larry Diamond also has said that when it breaks up, it's better for democracy. I think he's wrong. I think Larry is wrong, because the breakup can bring about more chaos. The way South Africa is now, the mentality of the people, the type of people, uneducated, some of them unemployable. Not that they are unemployed, they are just unemployable. And they make a mass magma of negativities. So we need to be very careful about our desire to see the ANC implode. I believe there should be a leader who can rally them round. I don't know, one young lady told me that she would have gone for Mrs. Mandela, Winnie Mandela. And I said, are you sure? I don't know.
Winnie would have been an interesting alternative.
Exactly.
But I'm not sure that in fact he was as constructive a force in creating ANC as a unifying force in the country as he could have been.
That's right.
He had also some esoteric ideas that did not come from
Exactly.
HIV. We have just a couple of minutes left, and you didn't mention Zimbabwe, but I think we all know.
Oh, yes. If you could quickly go there. Again, Zimbabwe. You and I mean, we know. I mean that I call him the dinosaur, of African politics. At 90, the man still wants to run for elections. And that's amazing. And that is because the people around him, the patronage system, it is not Mugabe, I believe. It is the people around Mugabe who feels that his exit will spell their doom, who are urging the old man to go on. That's number one. Number two, if at this point he's not senile, then there is a problem which everybody goes through at that age. You don't see anything wrong with yourself. I mean, it's general that way. Then the third point is this, that I think the international community has not helped him. I always say this. If we want to bring peace in the world, let it be total. Let us not just attack and attack. There can be a way of persuasion. There can be a way of helping him, assuring him of his continued existence without, because it's like give and take. No matter what crimes he has committed, forgive him, let him go, so that the people of Zimbabwe continue to live. At a point, there was 3,000% inflation. Does it make sense? And then the IMF and the World Bank withdraw support, rather. Who suffers? The last grain in Zimbabwe goes to his house. You know? So what I'm saying is this, that, yes, Zimbabwe is problematic. Let us not prop up Tsvangirai as if he's an angel. And that's what the West is doing. Everything about Tsvangirai is in the press everywhere in the world, CNN and whatnot. Everything negative about Mugabe is also, no, that's not the way. Tsvangirai is another problematic person.
Well, when SADC ruled against Mugabe in court, I think it was,
yes.
and he ignored the results. So you've got a guy who's not going to follow the rules. Just in terms of the things you mentioned 3 things that was wrong. That you didn't mention the quality of the opposition in Zimbabwe.
That is exactly what Tsvangirai I'm talking about. Tsvangirai is no replacement, no better replacement. That's what I was talking about. But he's riding on the crest wave of Western media. I mean, the guy is no good. You know, he's not going to replace Mugabe in any sense. And frankly speaking, Mugabe, what he should have done some 30 years ago, he didn't do it, and he saw a chance to use it for his continued existence, the land question. And the land question, mind you, is problematic in Namibia, in South Africa. So that's not the way to go about it. And he needs help. I believe whoever or whatever will do to exit him quietly, revere him as the father of the nation, and let him live in peace. And not go back for accounting his past and that kind of thing. Because it is the people of Zimbabwe who matter. You know.
When you see what happened in Egypt to President there,
Mubarak. Yeah.
You must think that Mugabe looks at that and says, never to me. And when you look in the other side, you see what happened in Libya to Gaddafi, and he looks all around him and see people like him.
That is true. That's true, my brother. But how long can you put your thumb on a cork underwater? It will pump up. So the earlier you leave it out, the better. I'm thinking if Mugabe had existed, and people revered like KK, you know, even though he was pursued, and today he's revered. When you go to Zambia, you mention KK. He's a hot cake, kind of. It's, oh, that's a father.
I mean, we haven't spent much time talking about North Africa, but
That's right.
Anything likely to happen in Africa anywhere like the Arab Spring in North Africa?
Well, many people are talking about that. And even it will happen, I'm saying no, it shouldn't. BBC came down, interviewed me about the very fact that why is Sub-Saharan Africa, do you think Sub-Saharan Africa also needs an Arab Spring? I said no. The Arab Spring itself was a negative thing. And they were odd, and I mean it. The Arab Spring is a negative thing. No, people just believe that democracy is coming. And you see CNN, pro-democracy forces are forcing Tunisian government. Who told you they are pro-democracy forces in the first place? And look at what is happening. Look, none of the places is now governable.
Including Egypt.
Including Egypt. So it's not true that it's pro-democracy forces. If we want to change a system, let us make it in such a way that, of course, revolutions can come. But if the revolutionaries themselves are not the persons who have something better in mind, they bring only chaos. And what I see in the Arab Spring is only chaos. And in any chaos, the negative happens. Al-Qaeda is taking over in all these places. They are taking over in all these places. And what I believe is that we shouldn't have hyped the revolution. We shouldn't have degraded the Ben Ali's, whom we had earlier on. The whole West is saying Ben Ali is the best Democrat. What happened then? We shouldn't have done what we are doing to Mubarak. I don't like him, but such a man on a stretcher to the court every day, and we're showing it, and we're happy about it. But then the renegades, on the other hand, are shooting happy, and they are all over the place. In Libya, we thought one Gaddafi out and there will be democracy. Sorry, look at what is happening. They've killed an American envoy. And they always want to demand of the government, hey, here we are. They blocked a road quite recently and demanded something. It's like it will take decades for the people of Libya to have peace. And so for me to say that Arab Spring should come somewhere else, I would say no. Not in that revolutionary way. I would like to see my Ghana changing and coming on to democracy line, good governance. The way, I mean, everybody, because the other time I was talking to some youth and they were praising the government for giving some positions to young people and they said it was empowering the youth. I'm sorry, but I insulted them. So you people, come on. I would prefer no youth in ministerial position to a situation where 90% of the youth in Ghana are all employed. That is better empowerment. And I mean it.
You have 54 countries on the continent now.
Yes.
Every one of them, including the one or two monarchies, holds some form of election.
Yes.
How many real democracies would you guess out of the 54?
Wow. Maybe none. By the parameters I use in measuring democracy, that is democracy and good governance together, maybe none in Africa. Maybe none. I look round, not in South Africa, not in my country. No, if you ask me about efforts, then there are several efforts. But that democracy, I go to the Democracy Watch, this thing, and then they have these colors showing where democracy is, and I laugh because we are in it and we know. But you look at it from outside, oh, Ghana has a constitution, frequent elections, no, democracy. Wait until some idiot presses the trigger. Not necessarily a coup, but anything. I teach these things and I tell my students. There was the Nanumba Kokomba War, which we have tagged as Guinea Fowl War. That's the name of it. Two tribes clashed, and other supporting tribes from this side and from this side supported each other, and the whole of the North was in flames. Oh yes, 1993-94. The whole of the North was in flames. Several people died. And then when I'm teaching them, I say, are you sure a guinea fowl can bring about war? It was the trigger point. A lot of things were going on and we kept quiet, including politics. The slaughter of the king of Dagbon is politics. So I'm saying, until we get good governance, where these things cannot happen, where people are free, where people are working, where work and happiness, and Nkrumah said, industries are there, prudence in economic governance, good roads, good hospitals, and whatnot. You go to the hospital today, if you don't have money, you will die. Even though we say we have national health insurance, because somebody is just applying the principle of it. And when you say it, you have these small young boys who have been given ministerial appointments insulting you to the hilt on radio and television. That's no democracy. That's no democracy.
It's free speech.
They call it free speech. And free speech, that doesn't bring democracy. It's no free speech.
Some have said that what's going on in the Ghanaian Supreme Court right now is the best in democracy. You agree?
I agree to an extent that we didn't go to war and we chose some of the tenets of democracy. This thing says that if you have a problem with the electoral process, please go to court. And we chose that. That is beautiful. But how prepared may we be in accepting or not polarizing the result of the Supreme Court? Because before the Supreme Court, there were all those perceptions. Oh, this Supreme Court person is belonging to this KKK party, this one belongs to the YYY party. So it's like everything has been polarized in Ghana, including the court system. So I am patiently waiting how we would accept the end of the court ruling and then where we progress from there.
What are the possible outcomes?
Well, I'll come to that. In Ghana, we have done so well in the sense that anytime there is crisis, we find a way of perfecting things. And well, thank God that is the way. In 79, we voted without ID cards. And then we said it wasn't good. In 92, we voted black and white cards. We said it. So we have been perfecting. I think we had this biometric So it's like we come out of crisis, and I believe and I hope we come out of this crisis too. Possible outcomes. 2 outcomes. 1, that the Supreme Court will say, or 3 outcomes. The Supreme Court will say, yes, the evidence is very overwhelming, and therefore the votes thrown away. Now collate the rest of the thing and declare a winner.
That would be an order the court would make to the
exactly
Commission.
The Electoral Commission.
Because the Supreme Court can't reverse it.
No, they can't reverse it. No, they have no right to reverse it. They don't declare who wins. All they can do is that we have a preponderance of evidence to show that, so these ones, don't count them. Count the rest and declare a winner. 2, the evidence does not merit any change. So Mahama, continue. 3, the evidence, then that will be the sociological side of it. The evidence shows that, well, there were some infractions and whatnot, and so the declaration was faulty, so go back to the polls. A re-enactment of the district. And in all 3, we have problems. Because in the first one, well, Ghanaians may agitate, but it's the lesser of all the evils. And then the second one, recounting that sort of thing. And then the third one, going back to the polls. Each one has its own. Going back to the polls, I fear. We'll be killing each other a lot.
But it's possible the second one will also lead to going back to the polls. Right?
Exactly. The second, yes.
If they recount and Mahama gets less than 50%, then it would be a runoff.
No. If that's what I'm saying, that each one has its own problem. That's the first one, rather. If they say go and recount the rest, and they count and Mahama has less, then EC can declare now. Okay. But the rippling effect of that is the fact of the change, how it will be accepted, the jubilation, and its aftermath. The next one will actually be a constitutional problem. Where does, if Nana Akufo-Addo, for example, is put, if the count is done and he is to come in, where do we go from here? Is he going to start his 4 years from when the counting, or there's a constitutional crisis? And, well, the Supreme Court
so
will
maybe the best outcome is neither one gets 50%.
Well, and then we go back to the polls. And then the problem still starts. We'll beat each other. We'll kill each other. I know. Yeah. Because even when things were so peacefully going, people took the pistol and came and collected ballot boxes here in Accra. So you can imagine somebody came with a pistol, pop, and everybody had to take cover. He got a chance to, but he was arrested though. I haven't even heard what has happened of that case. You know, even then, when there was nothing to show that there was tension. But now,
I have to ask you this question: how big a threat is corruption to democracy?
It is the biggest ever threat to democracy.
Is it?
I have always said it. Corruption is the biggest ever threat. Look, if a system is corrupt, nobody thinks about the state. And when nobody thinks about the state, nothing goes on, even up to the courts. If corruption is rife in a country, people can buy their way through everything. And so the system doesn't work. And if corruption is in the country, there is another big problem. The bigger problem is that government doesn't have money. People have money. So nothing goes on. And then corruption brings indiscipline. If a population is indisciplined, you can count it. We go nowhere. So for me, for all that we are doing, and most of the corruption comes from our so-called, the people who praise us. Today in this country, foreigners bribe their way through everything. How come the Chinese are in this country so much and they are, digging everywhere? It's because people in authority brought them. The rumor is that MPs and ministers go for the concessions, they go to China, buy the equipment, bring the Chinese, come dig and get gold for me. That's corruption. And our rivers are corrupted too. It's like the rivers go, colored, and people get diseases. So corruption I take corruption as a virus in a computer. It destroys everything.
This Danso, is that going to be a big problem environmentally, where people are going to rise up when they find themselves being poisoned?
No, the point is that now, everybody, you see, when corruption starts in the country, what happens is that everybody wants to be part of it, as if it's a good thing. It's like, I don't want to be left behind.
It's like playing the lottery.
Exactly. But it reaches a point when it explodes. So it may not come now, but someday, when the government has no money, when inflation is big, when people begin to leave the country, when people begin to export their own currencies outside the country. Come come on, the explosion is there. And the state implodes. So as for corruption, every country must endeavor to kick corruption out of the country. Corruption is something, it tends to a point where corruption and narcotics come together. It starts gradually with corruption, and then because people are not getting part of the money, narcotics come in, and they support the narcotic trade and whatnot and whatnot. Narcotism shows that the whole country will be ruled by the narcotic barons. Guinea-Bissau is a country in point. And if it happens that in most countries, in Ghana, we are catching the fishes, we don't touch the barons. But they are here. They are here. There was a big case in Ghana. Everybody thought, oh, when we got in one of the big fishes, well, he's out. He's a free man. I'm talking about Tagore. He's a free man. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't say he doesn't have to be free. But I was surprised that a person has his voice on a tape as to how they were going to share some booty. And the courts are able to tell us that that is not a proper way of collecting evidence. So the man must go free.
Professor Danso, thank you very, very
You're
much.
very welcome. You're very, very welcome.
Time.
Right.
Really
You're very
appreciate it.
welcome.
I truly enjoyed this conversation with you.
Right. Thank you so much.